Hello and welcome. This is Montelibero podcast. My name is Birkin, and today we're in the studio with our distinguished guests. We've got Timothy Allen and Peter Yun from the Free Cities Foundation, and we're accompanied by Michael Querens.
Hello, everyone.
Say hello, guys.
Hello.
Hi, good to be here, Birkin.
Oh yeah, thank you for being here. First of all, how did you find out about the project? How did you actually learn that there is this project called Montelibero?
Well, from me, we've got a colleague who is responsible for finding out about all of the new libertarian projects that are being developed across the world. We've got a big database that have got projects that are at a really early stage of development and just a concept to projects that have actually got people living in them and got legal autonomy. And he flagged this new project. I think he came across your website or some post online, and we looked into it and we decided to develop a full Free Communities Directory article about what you did. And it seemed to be one of the most promising projects on our radar. So we decided to come over and find out more about it in person.
Is this database open or something like that? Can we look into it too, just for the sake of the curiosity?
Yeah, it's on our website. It's totally, it's a page on the website with links to all the projects that we have at least found out about.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all the trouble of actually coming over and seeing us here. We are honored and we really appreciate that, because we don't really have a lot of international organizations such as yourself, Which brings me to my next question. Can you tell us about the Free Cities Foundation? What does it do? What is its mission? Like for someone who has never heard of it.
Yeah, so the Free Cities Foundation is a not-for-profit organization. We're officially headquartered in Liechtenstein in Europe, but we don't have an official office, a physical office. We're all based in different countries. So Tim and I are based in the UK. I'm in England, he's in Wales. We've got another couple of London-based colleagues as well. And then there are people based in America, Honduras, Germany, the Netherlands, and the Czech Republic. So it's a group of online collaborators that work to promote the idea of free cities, which we define as self-governing territories that uphold individual rights and freedoms. Those can range from small intentional communities of libertarians that come together because they want to live together with a common ethos, such as respecting the non-aggression principle, through to full legally autonomous territories. And our job is to promote those territories because we think they're a good thing for the world, good thing for international development, and make people that might want to move to those aware of the opportunities that are available to them.
Wow, that is impressive.
Cool.
Thank you. And Tim, what is your role in the project?
Officially I'm the creative director, but what I mainly do is produce our podcast, which is the best part about it, to be honest. I get to go around the world checking out these projects and interviewing people, basically, to create a podcast, but also to create a long-standing record of what's going on. Our listeners are obviously very interested in the Free Cities concept, but also the wider liberty community in general. We cover a broad spectrum of guests on the podcast, but it's geared towards people looking for liberty, and obviously, what you're doing here is perfectly aligned with that. You're a group of people looking to create a society with libertarian values, and I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you a lot here, and we found out a lot of good information in the process.
That's fantastic. I've had a chance to actually listen to your podcast, and I should say it's fantastic stuff. I listened to the first 4 or 5 episodes, and it is unique in many ways because it gives you a hands-on experience on what life is about, what life is like in these communities, because there is very little information on these projects online, I think, because they're probably busier, implementing their ideas, making it a reality. But this gives you an insight into what like what stage they're in at the moment and what their aims are, what their dreams are, etc. And it's unique. Absolutely. We will provide the link in the description so you can also listen to this. You've got like 22 episodes so far, right?
I was creating number 23 yesterday.
Oh.
And we've got probably about 20, at least 20 recorded and ready to go. Well, the way we work currently, because like you say, this is a fledgling, industry is the wrong word. It's a fledgling, kind of space, let's say. And we're just fact finding as much as possible. And so we're traveling to places, like we've come to Montenegro for a week, and we're just hoovering up as much content as we can so that we can offer it out to the wider community. Because like you say, there are not many people doing it. And I have a journalistic background, so I'm very inquisitive, let's say. I've always been really inquisitive, as you know. I mean, we've spoken on the podcast for over 3 hours, and I really want to understand what's going on here, because I want to be able to talk to other people about it. When someone, it's very important for me to fully understand what's going on here, so I have an opinion about it, because there aren't many other people, at the center of this thing that's going on. And you often get asked about, so what are free cities? And in our definition, it's a massive spectrum of which intentional communities are on one part of it. But you need to know from first-hand experience what is actually happening here. Like, for example, we're in your clubhouse at the moment. You would never understand the sense of community that exists here unless you actually came to this place and experienced it for yourself. No website would give you that information. But sitting at your communal table over there, being served food and seeing people co-working and talking about projects and doing, and just kids running around, and then you get that sense that there's a real community here. There's something happening, despite the fact there's also a city, a small MTL city being built, sort of 15-minute drive away, and that's a whole, those kind of things you need to come and see for yourself. Otherwise, you're not really gonna. Well, in my case, anyway, I wouldn't feel I have a good opinion on what this actually is here. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, inquisitiveness is one of those qualities that you might want to have if you're a journalist and if you do what you do. And definitely, you can't display all of this vibe of the community on the website. You have to be there to actually feel it. And this is the reason why we're so grateful for you for coming over, and taking the time and everything. And I have a couple of questions about podcasting, right? What brought you into podcasting? Because you are a film director, and whatever gave you a reason?
Very easy answer. I've had a few iterations. I'm like 52 now. I've been working for like 30 years, but my career's had a few iterations. It began in photography. Mm-hmm. Which is a visual medium. I'm a storyteller, and you realise this after a certain amount of years. You think you want to be a photographer, or you want to be a filmmaker, or you want to be a podcaster, but what you actually realise is you're kind of a storyteller. You like telling stories. In photography, that's quite easy. You point the camera, you press a button, you get a picture, but you can't tell very much of the story. Mm-hmm. Even though a lot of people declare that that's not true, a lot of photographers who say, "Oh, you can, a photojournalist is what I was. You can tell so much from this photo. It gives me such a sense of what was going on, or whatever." And I actually don't believe that, because I worked in film after that, and I could interview you for 20 seconds, and I could get more information than I could ever get from a photograph of you. Mm. Okay, in 20 seconds, right now.
Especially since no one has seen me.
Sure, yes. I've been taking secret photos of you, don't worry.
Okay.
But then there's another stage after that, after film, and that's long form conversations. And I have been on a journey to realizing that the best way to convey ideas and stories is through long form conversation. And we're living through a moment in history when long form conversation is scaling for the first time. Like prior to the internet, we had no way of transmitting long form conversations around the world at any moment. And I've said this many times before, like it's a revolution, it's a revolution in the dissemination of ideas, because the old method, apart from film, which is very time consuming and very expensive and very difficult, the old method was to summarize an idea in a succinct way or print it out and have someone interpret it from a book. Whereas with podcasting, you actually get to listen in on often experts talking for hours on the one thing that you're genuinely interested in. And I have had my life changed listening to podcasts. In the last 5 years, I've learned more than I ever learned in my life anyway. And I've had my life changed mowing the lawn with a set of earphones in and two people talking from, 3 weeks ago in America, talking about something that changed my life. And that's the most powerful implementation of storytelling that I can think of. And as a result, I also like the fact that I travel around with a little suitcase now with 3 mics and a little box that records it. And you can go out there and you can really change hearts and minds with that little box. I used to travel, like even when I was a photographer, I used to travel with tons of equipment. And making films, don't even go there. You have to, you're carrying like 14 boxes, and you have to do carnets, get in and out of countries. I don't know, like it's a terrible, terrible way to communicate, because it's such a tough experience. Whereas podcasting, easy, efficient, and you really do reach people in a way that is different from films, because often people are listening in headphones and quietly, lying in bed, sitting in the car alone. They actually get a moment to focus on actually what you're saying, and it's super powerful. Take it from me, who has seen many iterations of the media. This is by far the most powerful way to disseminate ideas.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so easy to start. Anyone can do this as long as they have a good idea, right? Because a lot of the podcasts they are all over the place. They're too generic. And this is why it's very difficult to maybe distinguish between them. But this is why I hope that we will be able to reach out to our audience, because if you're looking for libertarian podcasts, they're few and far between.
Well, what's the interesting evolution of what's been going on in the world has given rise to specialization as the way to be successful. Like I say, in the media, it was previously you'd read the New York Times, and you'd get someone's opinion on a watered down version of what you were reading about. If you specialize and you go say that article was about Bitcoin mining, say, it's inevitably a load of bullshit, what they're writing, and you know that because you're an expert in that, and you read that article and you go, what the hell are they talking about? Whereas if you go to a podcast about Bitcoin mining and listen to 3 people who all work in that space, doing whatever they're doing, you get absolute expert opinions, undeniable expert opinions. And that's, the media underestimated human beings. They didn't think you would sit there and listen for 3 hours to people talking about something. But it was wrong. It was completely wrong. People do. I mean, Joe Rogan's podcast is the biggest media organization in the world pretty much now. And he's just him and sitting at a table talking about shit,
Yeah.
And so they were wrong. The sub-editors were wrong. You don't need to summarize a story. You need to go very specifically into that thing and give really good on-the-ground detailed information. No one wants to hear a watered-down version anymore. They want the truth. They want to know, and they want to be able to make their mind up. So in a conversational situation, they want to hear 2 people discussing it. They don't want someone telling them. They want to hear a to and fro. I think this, you think that. All right, well, what about this? Or what about that? What about that? And as you're listening, you get to make your mind up too. And like I say, it's incredibly powerful. I think it's on the level of the printing press. It's the printing press version of dissemination of spoken word. And I think it's that big a revolution for sure.
Absolutely.
I have to say it's very interesting to listen to you. It feels like you can go in hours putting that all to that.
Definitely, and it kind of what you're saying, just to piggyback on that, it does develop critical thinking, and you are able to make your own decisions, like to try on this or that idea. It's like, this is me, and this is not exactly me, and you wouldn't be able to just get that from a little summary. Yes, but you're right. We can actually listen to you for hours.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Peter, we kind of got carried away. We kind of let you out. But how much experience of podcasting, I mean, as a listener, do you have?
I used to work for a prominent Bitcoiner called Saifedean Moose. You might know him from the Bitcoin Standard.
Nice.
And my role was the title was officially podcast manager, but essentially my role was to research the podcast guests before they came on the podcast. And one of the things that opened my eyes to was just how good a networking tool podcasts are. Because I'd go out there. When I first got into Bitcoin, I became obsessed with it. I discovered Bitcoin and the Austrian School of Economics at the same time, and I ended up reading everything I could get my hands on both topics. And a lot of these authors that I'd gone really deep with in terms of their ideas and the written word, I was suddenly having an opportunity to send emails to propose questions to, and that was a really exciting experience, because often when you're engaging with someone's ideas through a medium like a book, it's like a one-sided thing. You're getting the ideas disseminated to you, and you have to answer questions by yourself. You don't have an ability to interact. And so when I was working on the Bitcoin Standard podcast, I found it really amazing to be able to reach out to all of these authors that I'd engage with on a personal level and talk to them and ask them questions. So it's also a medium that I'm personally really enthusiastic about. And last year, we were making a film for our conference. That's actually how Tim started to work with the organization. We ran the first Liberty in Our Lifetime conference in Prague, or the second overall, the first one that I was personally organizing. And we were really keen that we captured what was happening at this event. And Tim has got an extensive background in film, and we knew each other through Saifedean's podcast seminars. So we actually got back in touch, and Tim made the film for us. And it was following that we had discussions about what we wanted to achieve. You know, I've been at the foundation as managing director for around a year at that point, and Tim was looking for opportunities to explore podcasting. And we both realized that this was a really good fit for the organization. And it feels like it was a long time ago, but I think we only started
It was only 6 months ago.
It was only 6 months ago.
Do you know how I know that? Because I filled in my LinkedIn profile, and it asked me when I started. It was November last year.
Right.
Wow. Well, you're so good together. I mean, like you can definitely have this partner feeling, as I can see. So I don't know.
Well, Peter's right in that podcasting is a phenomenal tool for networking, which was something we realized as we were doing it. And so we've managed to marry the two together, which is traveling. Peter's obviously connected. His role is slightly different. But the good thing about podcasting is you can phone somebody up or send them an email and say, hey, would you come on the podcast? And they normally say yes, especially because we've got a good podcast and we've got a good reach on our podcast. And whereas if you sent them an email and said, hey, can I have a quick 20-minute Zoom call? Most people go, nah. But what you end up with is a 2-hour meeting with them, basically. Not only that, you know what podcasting is like. We're doing it right now. It's an intimate thing. Like you'll never forget the person that you sat there and talked to for 2 hours with headphones on, which isolates the sound into this really sort of small little bubble. And I think it's, like I say, it's a powerful tool. I think I was going to say people are underestimating it, but they're not underestimating it, because there are millions and millions of podcasts out there. There's a reason why it's exploded the way it has, because it's the medium for our time, really. And you know, you're using film along with it as well. But you know, I just think however you do it, just do it, because long form communication is the way to understand ideas, and especially what we think are good ideas.
Yeah, we've been receiving requests for the video. For some people, it's important to also not also to listen to it for hours, and for sometimes just to see people talking, just have this sneak peek into this bubble, as you said. They wanted it, so we decided to add it from time to time, and probably develop some skills doing that, because this is also time consuming and
but we're learning.
Costly.
Well, and I mean, AI will probably take that job away from you relatively soon. It's already available to rig 3 cameras up to an AI, 1 wide and 2 close-ups on your subjects, and it'll edit it live for you while it's going. I've not seen it in real life myself. I've seen it, I've researched it and found it exists, but with the way AI is moving, I would imagine it'll be another couple of years when that will just be the norm, almost certainly, and it'll probably happen through mobile phones as well.
Yeah, all we have to do is just wait and see for it to happen. But going back to what you're saying about how revolutionary podcasts are and how important it is to get these ideas across, do you get the sense that you're making history? Because you, among these mundane routine things that you do, like you travel a lot, I'm sure you're preoccupied with packing and unpacking and all the logistics, but do you actually have the feeling that this is going to last, and some people are going to be influenced by it? Like, do you have to remind yourself or yourselves that, okay, well, this potentially could do to some people what happened to you when you were mowing your lawn?
Well, I think if you're a podcast listener, you know that. I think the ideal is to reach 1 million people per episode, obviously, or 20 million people per episode. That's the ideal. But in these small communities of niche ideas, I think your role is to basically speak to the people that want to listen, but then try and expand your kind of reach a little bit by including people on the fringes. You know, I would call them, in our case, free cities adjacent people. You know, like, I know, for example, if you're into free cities, you're probably into a bunch of other stuff as well.
Sure.
Which includes anything from, I don't know, permaculture to like Bitcoin to Hayek, from, you know, like, and as long as you're kind of just pushing the boundary constantly, you are hopefully, without diluting your message too much, bringing people into the core idea of what you're doing.
True. Did you want to add something, Peter?
I do feel like something is happening in the world right now. If we'd been having this conversation in, say, 2017, then we'd be talking about a theoretical idea. The idea that we should be creating real autonomous communities where libertarian ideas can be put into practice. But we're witnessing in real time the emergence of real communities, some of which have full legal autonomy and some of which are rapidly growing, but have only emerged in the last couple of years. And there are various drivers for that. I think the internet in itself has been a big driver. I think Bitcoin has been another driver, because Bitcoin has catalyzed a lot of questioning of traditional ideas and given people a monetary medium for exchanging in a purely voluntarist way. And I think that's very important for the emergence of libertarian communities. So I do feel like in the last few years, like this community, you've got some like 300 members that are part of your broader community, depending on how you define it. But this has only been here for 2 years.
Actually, one and a half.
1.5, 2 years, right? So a short period of time. Our major projects in Honduras, Prospera, that was founded in 2018. Ciudad Morazan was founded in 2019. We've now got 11 projects in our free communities directory. We're probably going to be up to 15 by the end of the year. So I do feel like we're at the early stages of some real movement, and it does feel exciting to be documenting it. I expect this project to be a lot bigger in a year's time, in 2 years' time, and we look forward to coming back and talking to you then and finding out how things have progressed.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's keep our fingers crossed, and we'll see. But you've mentioned how you're excited about seeing these projects grow and develop and pop up here and there. What's your personal takeaway? Like on a personal level, do you educate yourself? Or do you? I mean, there's probably constant learning involved in the process, but maybe you have now a much better understanding of how the world works, maybe, or something. Like what is it that you saw that you never saw before actually launching on this journey?
There are certainly lots of things I've been learning about how the system works internationally and why it is so difficult to create a free community. Because in theory it sounds pretty straightforward. Just negotiate with the government to get some autonomy and then do what you want. Establish your own government, establish your own financial system, establish your own regulations. But the reality of it is that if you want to realize the massive advantages that have come through globalization and the economies of scale that come from free trade, you have to interact with the old legacy system. And that in itself can often be a highly restricting thing. I think a great example is what's happened with El Salvador when they've introduced Bitcoin as legal tender. This is something that everyone welcomed at the time. And of course, many of us, or Bitcoiners at least, welcomed at the time. But when you look at how difficult it's been for them to actually use Bitcoin in their financial sector, it's proved to be a really big challenge for them. And part of the reason for that is that they have to interact with the US dollar if they want to trade with the rest of the world. And with that comes all of the regulations and all of the AML checks and all of the requirements that are imposed on them by other central authorities. So a big thing for me has been to realize from interacting with these communities that yes, there's early progress being made, but you have to be really crafty if you want to become a successful libertarian community. You have to be savvy about what the existing legal systems are, and you have to have good strategies informed by strong legal expertise if you're going to really become independent. So I think it's probably a longer game than I'd originally anticipated, but it feels like we made some good early progress with it.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think of the timeline? How soon will we see truly autonomous communities that would be completely independent of the state?
Well, I have absolutely no idea. I've spoken to a lot of people on the podcast about this, and they're on a spectrum. There are people who say at one end of the spectrum, we'll never have any more autonomous communities in the world because there are no more frontiers. Those people actually think Mars will be our next autonomous community because what are you going to do? Try and rule Mars from the Earth? You can't. Or maybe out to sea. I mean, do you know what seasteading is?
Of course.
Right. Well, seasteading's a thing. Underwater living. If you think about all the establishment of countries in the past, they were frontiers on the whole, unless they were people conquering someone else. And yeah, we have no more land frontiers. So I personally, I don't know. I probably veer towards there, unless there is some kind of collapse of society, in which case obviously there'll be something new which arises from the flames. But nobody wants that. You could look at, say, look at Honduras and Prospera. Currently, they have a lot of regulatory power. You could easily argue that in 20 years' time, with the right government in power, they have been granted more power to dictate their own rules. But it's a really that one, according to me, I don't know what Peter thinks, but it's the prospect of complete autonomy is very much a long game in my estimation.
Right. What's your take on that, Peter?
I agree. I think, though, that in the long run, and its timelines are really difficult, but in the long run, if libertarian or Austrian economics is correct, it's a correct way of understanding the world, then what we should expect is that societies that have systems that uphold private property rights and where people can interact on a purely voluntary basis, we should find that those societies tend to attract more capital, tend to attract more talent, tend to succeed, and as a result, economically outcompete the more statist, the more restrictive societies. And I think that if you look back at history, that has tended to happen on a long enough time scale. Like countries like the US became very powerful in the 19th century because they were developing on a new frontier and able to introduce much leaner forms of government. But throughout their history, they've always placed primacy on protecting individual rights and private property rights. And I would argue that's the reason why the US was so successful. Similar thing with Hong Kong in post-World War II era. Hong Kong had a remarkably different political system to Great Britain. Its government was about a third of the size. And because the government was restricted, but it had that basic legal structure in place based on British common law, it was able to grow wealthier than the country that colonized it in about 4 to 5 decades. So we've seen that play out in history. And I think what we're probably going to see in the 21st century as it continues is that countries that introduce more libertarian policies or allow devolved power in the form of something resembling free cities, whether it will be our model or something slightly different, I don't know. I think that countries that introduce that will see that they're attracting more capital, they're able to grow better, and other countries will lose out to them. And what that will result in is there will be more and more countries copying, and then as a result, this flow towards freer policies will become unstoppable.
Also, I would add to that. Mm-hmm. I think, we've just came from Portugal before this, and I interviewed a lot of young libertarians in Portugal. It was a Students for Liberty conference. And when you talk to the youngsters and the people involved with the youngsters in the libertarian movement, you realize that they're thinking about placing themselves in government. Now, if you follow that timeline forward, not all of them obviously, but plenty of them are are concerned with placing themselves in the middle of government in some shape or form. Now, if you go forward enough on the timeline, that means, go back to Prospera. If anyone with a sort of libertarian edge makes it into the parliament, into a sort of strong position in parliament in Honduras, there's no reason why they wouldn't start being more friendly with Prospera. And right. Like Peter says, Prospera incentivizes governments to give them more power because they're bringing in tax dollars to Prospera. They're attracting new business to the country. They're doing things that benefit the government. But there's no reason why a government couldn't have forward-thinking people in it that would be interested in devolving their power, I think. And libertarians think like that. And there's no reason why they wouldn't be part of a process where a completely autonomous region wouldn't arise within the sort of the border of a country.
Well, yeah, that is true. But what kind of is holding me back in terms of how optimistic I am about the future of such communities is looking at some countries that sort of took steps back, and rather than welcoming these new freedoms, they're trying to suppress those people, like freedom thinkers, free thinkers, whatever, because there's this fear of novelty, fear of innovation, anything new, because governments tend to be conservative and they don't like to give up power easily. And this is what I'm concerned about. I don't know if you feel that way. And I would like to be optimistic as much as I would. I still look at, Russia, my home country, which has taken considerable steps back towards the Soviet Union and whatever, and just trying to keep it and sort of solidifying their system in its way.
I think the best argument in favor of liberty is that liberty and authoritarianism are a cycle, an ebb and a flow, and we can see that. And the reason they are is because as a government gets more authoritarian, the pushback naturally rises as well. I think, we have a beautiful example of that in Bitcoin currently. In the crash of 2008, when the shit's hitting the fan, a decentralized currency arises, which is the antithesis to this system. Look, Russia has ebbed and flowed. Russia collapsed once relatively recently under the weight of its own government, let's say. I think there will always be a version of game theory in the world, and what I mean by that is there will always be countries and nations and states and cities that are vying for your attention. They're vying for your business. And as more countries become authoritarian, like Peter says, that incentivizes countries which may not have had an advantage in the past to start offering up a way out and attracting people, attracting capital, attracting, all those assets that make a country good. And as history shows us, I think that's the ebb and flow of culture. I think that's the ebb and flow of society. You get people in society that want to tell people what to do, and you get people like us who are like, I'd just voluntarily work with you, but really, it's none of your business what I'm doing, kind of thing. And there's a constant battle between those two worlds, and it's like the breath of society, isn't it? Breathing in and out, And I don't see it ever changing. But I do see it moving, and that's what we're seeing now, I think.
Okay, here's hoping. Did you want to add something at all?
Well, I agree with your characterization that sometimes it can be a case of movements towards liberty taking a 2 steps forward, 1 step back approach. I think that's part of the reason why it's so important to understand economics. I see understanding economics as a way in which you can pull reason and causality out of complexity, because one of the difference between doing social science and looking at an economy and doing a science experiment in a lab is that you can't run an experiment on society as a whole. There are too many factors. You can't create 2 identical societies and see what happens when you adjust policy X in one and policy Y in another. You have to try and tease out what the important factors are at play. And because of that, sometimes when things go right, people misdiagnose the reasons for it. And when things go wrong, people don't understand why that's happened. And that can result in policies that have caused poverty and deprivation being introduced when they shouldn't be. I think that's happened quite a lot. But overall, when you look at history, I do think that the picture is more positive. I do think we live in a freer world today in many important ways than we have in the past. And if you look at, we were talking about Russia and the Soviet Union, obviously it took a long time, but the Soviet Union did collapse. And even though there are huge problems in Russia today, this society as a whole is still on balance freer than it was in the Soviet Union in terms of people's ability to trade with each other. And we have the same example with China. China's also got great problems, and there are great restrictions on liberty there, but it's way freer than it was in the Maoist era, and people are way better off than they used to be. So I agree that it's a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back with liberty, but I'm overall optimistic that it's only a matter of time, particularly because now we live in an age where capital is so much more mobile than it used to be. So much of the value created in the economy comes from intangible assets that can move across borders easily. It's not like in the 19th century when the economy was based around really capital-intensive industries in cities, in warehouses, industrial centers. Now capital is based in the knowledge economy, and that means that people and jurisdictions can respond much more quickly to incentives and diagnose problems with their political and economic system faster than they otherwise would.
You see, the reason that the image of society looks freer or something like that is the technology development. And don't you think that the other side of it looks freer, but basically the technology provided the governments with the ability to oppress just very specifically, very targeted people, activists, and something like that. The image looks like it's freer, but in a way it's getting more and more oppressive. Yeah, and they there is a theory, they call it like informational authoritarianism or something like that. There is a new term for that they do not specifically oppress the huge amount of people, just destroying the whole classes like under the Marxists or something like that. They can choose very specifically with the old technologies they have now, who are talking too much, who is smarter, who they bribe someone, they threaten the another one, they imprison someone else, and at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, they kill someone. I've been seeing a lot of these things, and this is the scary part of this seemingly free society with all of these technologies. And I don't think we just need to sit and wait until this bright picture is coming to the reality. I think we actually need to take a lot of active steps to just not let this cyber gulag to become a reality, because I believe we're moving very fast towards this direction.
Great. I agree with you about the direction we're moving in. Once again, I'll just point out that you have to take responsibility for your side of that bargain, and that involves you using privacy-centric tools in your technology. That involves you sort of maybe trying to predict that you may need to move jurisdictions, whatever. I agree that technology has scaled authoritarianism. It's scaling it right now. It's allowing, funnily enough, small bureaucratic institutions to cast a very wide net. It's using algorithms instead of real force, as we see in social credit score systems, which basically almost run themselves. You won't need a huge amount of people to run that. The reason the Soviet Union collapsed, as far as I can work out, is because they ran out of people to run the system. You need a lot of people to enforce authoritarianism. But with the digital world, you can actually do it algorithmically. However, don't forget, liberty tools are digital liberty tools are also scaling. This is the point. This is how. So you need to take responsibility. You need to work out how to use. Don't use your iPhone with their operating system. Use Graphene OS. I've got Graphene OS on mine. It's not no one's tracking me. Privacy tools. When you're messaging, get out of the way of, leave all the sort of digital networks alone that are basically tracking you and doing all these things, and just start making plan Bs for potential outcomes. I agree. We shouldn't be sitting back doing nothing, but we should be taking responsibility for ourselves as individuals and our families and our close friends, and making sure that everyone knows, look, these are the options when these kind of technocratic dystopias start arising, which they kind of already are.
I agree totally about that. Moving towards the freer technologies, thinking about it, reading, understanding how it works, trying not to provide the data, governments with your personal data and stuff. But you see, I've been into this informational security stuff for quite a long time already, and I've seen one specific thing. The governments, they do realize that. They perfectly realize that, and the public do not. And the governments, they took steps, like few more steps in front of the public. When public trying to upgrade the freedom technologies, the government is always there. They're trying to scam cryptography. They put their viruses and in hardware, and on the hardware level. The processors, they often comes with a small operating systems already integrated in the processor. They could actually hack almost anything now. Without you can feel like you are secure under some open source operating system and something like that. But in the meantime, you sometimes do not realize how far away sometimes governments are already. They few steps further, or quite often.
Do you know what though? I trust decentralized networks more than I trust centralized networks, because we're shown continuously that the decentralized networks innovate faster and better. And I would say about this that open source technology, for example, it's unstoppable. We're talking about a completely decentralized network of people all coming up with their own solutions for these problems and sharing them in an open way. And in the end, everyone becomes an enemy of the state. They just don't know it yet. And you described the average person as not knowing what's going on. I agree, because most of them haven't had the need to look into this stuff yet. But as dystopias emerge, more and more people become the enemy of the state, one by one. And you either work for them or you're their enemy. I mean, that's how it works. And at those times, you discover people have a touch point with a lack of freedom. They have a touch point with the authority. And then they start looking in the direction of freedom. And they're like, how do I make this happen? And there's a long tradition of people ready and waiting to show you the way, and it's a growing decentralized movement, and it's unstoppable for that exact reason.
Right. It is Michael's favorite thing to say. Like, he often says that everyone is secretly libertarian. It's just that they haven't realized it yet. For different people, these are different wake-up calls. For some, it's the COVID era. For some, it's the war. For someone, it's something else. But eventually, people will sort of wake up and will realize that they are, and they should be, the only ones who will control their lives and their destinies.
Everyone inherently loves freedom. And the reason you know that is because you have children and you watch them run out in a field full of buttercups. They can't help themselves.
Exactly.
And the only way that you can not like freedom is to have it beaten out of you. And that does happen to a lot of people. But every new person coming into this world inherently loves freedom. And that's never going to change.
Yeah, that might be one of these, not obvious incentives which you can use talking to people, because they usually used to say that their main three incentives to push people towards libertarianism, for example, it's sex,
drugs,
fear, sex, fear, and do you remember the third one? I just don't remember. Like three main incentives, but I think there is also this one incentives, because me personally, I don't feel fear in compared to the feeling of freedom. I go through the fear. I go through the these small wishes towards this is like the main incentive for me personally, and I think that this incentive could be the very solid one between all of these common incentives we used to talk, and maybe this is we could use to incentivize and to push people towards the libertarian ideas, something like that.
Yeah, well, here's hoping. I actually wanted to ask you a couple of questions about the founder of your organization. Maybe because you've had a chance to actually cooperate, maybe you can give us sort of an insight into his views, like how he sees freedom in the world, like what his mission is in his opinion. What does he believe in?
Sure, yeah. So Titus Gebel is a German entrepreneur. He's worked a lot in the resources, the mining sector, gold mining, oil, minerals. And what he discovered from his career is that when he went to different jurisdictions in order to try to operate his business, he was hampered by lots of regulations. And when he explained the problems he was facing to politicians that wanted to try and encourage businesses like his to operate in their territory, they viewed the system as if it was unchangeable. It was this big behemoth that wasn't able to make any substantial reforms. And that brought him to the conclusion that if we want to create society that is based on more libertarian ideas, where we don't have an overly restrictive role for the state, then the most effective strategy is to establish something called a free private city. A free private city is, we're called the Free Cities Foundation now. So we work with a variety of different developments, not necessarily all aspiring free private cities, but some of the projects we work with are. And the reason that he proposes free private cities is because, as we discussed earlier in this conversation, all of the land that exists on Earth is currently occupied by a government. There is no uncharted territory that can be homesteaded into ownership in the libertarian sense. So the only strategy we have, if we're to establish new developments on land, is to negotiate with existing governments and convince them that they should sacrifice some of their autonomy so that freedom-oriented ideas can be implemented in practice. So Titus has proposed a specific model for that, which is an operator-run jurisdiction called a free private city. In a free private city, there is no government in the traditional sense. There are no taxes. There is no authority that regulates and monitors the incomes of individual businesses or individual people and then works out what taxes are owed as a result of the business activity. Instead, the relationship between the operating entity and the citizen is much more like that of a landlord and a tenant. The tenant moves into a new property on the understanding that there are certain rules, normally quite simple rules, like don't drill into the walls, don't make noise after 10 p.m. at night, respect your neighbors, don't litter in the public areas, respect the rights of other people as long as they're not causing problems for the community. And you pay a fixed price for living within this area. And Titus proposes that the relationship between a governing entity in a free private city and the citizen should be the same. The governing entity should propose a contract for services, and those services can be things like taking the rubbish out, making sure that the policing is dealt with, the area is secure, providing some legal services. All of those are specified in a contract with a given price tag, and the citizens can choose to consent to that or not. But once the contract is signed, much like a rental agreement, the conditions are fixed. You can't have other members of the community join later and say, hey, we're now the majority, we're going to increase his rent or we're going to change his conditions, because contracts are contracts. And if new contracts come in, they can be different, but they have to be compatible with the old contracts. So the two key features of a free private city are, firstly, there's a for-profit private operating company that runs the area and provides the services that we normally associate with government, although we would argue they would be much, much simpler and much less hands-on than existing government regulations. And secondly, there's a citizen's contract that exists between every resident and the operator. And I personally think this is the best model I know of for running a society. But as the foundation, we work with a variety of different models. But I think this is our best chance of creating real libertarian societies within the existing legal and economic conditions that there are in the world today.
Yeah, they're quite interesting idea.
Am I right to understand that eventually all kinds of communities, including intentional communities, will end up in this area, right? The free cities, private cities with contracts and some sort of government that works as the night watchman or whatever?
Not necessarily. They may decide to. So Montelibero may decide eventually that if they grow to a sufficient size, they have a sufficient number of members, sufficient number of people that support their core principles, like the non-aggression principle, they may decide that they're going to make a bid for self-determination, which is allowed under the various UN charters. Or they may say to the Montenegro government, we would like to have a degree of autonomy, and this is why we think this would be beneficial to us and also beneficial to you. So it's an aspiration that any intentional community could have in the long term. And as a Free Cities Foundation, we would look to support and advise any community that sought to do that. But it's by no means an inevitability. It's by no means a prerequisite of being one of the communities we work with. It's just an option that I think is available to people.
You've been to many of these communities, and you travel a lot. Do you see anything that strikes you, or that still surprises you, or that might seem similar, that kind of puts people or these communities together in some way, so you can see same features perhaps? Maybe you've seen something that you've already seen somewhere else in Prospera or in Salvador, etc.
For me, at the core is private property rights. It's one of the prerequisites for all these things. I don't know about you, Peter.
Well, I've visited Ciudad Morazán, Prospera, and Montelibero. And then there were various other communities that are working with us in a tangential way. Madeira would be an example. They are trying to implement Bitcoin. They are trying to encourage Bitcoin adoption across their territory. And a belief in private property rights, a belief in autonomy, devolved power, decentralized government. Those are all things that seem to be motivating people, even though they have very different ways of bringing about the solution and very different political realities in their surroundings.
Also, an opt-in aspect seems to be a prerequisite. The ability to opt in and out, rather than in the system we have now, which is there's no opting out of the democratic system that you're in. There's no such thing. They seem to be, at the heart of all of these movements probably are people thinking, you can't tell me what to do, if I'm honest.
And that's
when you unpack that statement, there are elements of, it's my property. I put my heart and soul into this thing. Why would you have a say over what happens to it?
Sure.
And it's there in the people's
DNA.
hearts, and DNA. It seems very obvious. It seems very intuitive that if you would do something, put your hard work into a thing that you create, be it your house or your community or whatever, then it makes sense that you have a say over that thing and not defer, especially to a very centralized authority, often which isn't even in your jurisdiction, telling you that you have to do that. And that's why I think this movement is of its time, because you can see the centralizing force happening on the planet right now. You've got all these. The EU is a classic example. It's a centralizing force. It's taken a bunch of countries which have often not much in common and put them under the same rules in many cases, which don't make any sense at all. And you can see the centralizing force working even stronger. You can see what the world might look like in another 20, 30, 40 or 50 years. It's a centralizing force. There'll be one world government at one point, probably. I don't know for sure, but you can see that there are plenty of people in positions of power who adhere to the idea that centralizing is a good idea. And we all know the pitfalls of centralization, and that's why at the other end of the scale, the sort of decentralized jurisdictions people want devolution of power, and it makes total sense to us.
Just as you said, that technology with the podcasts allows us to have this new idea, listen to this conversations to educate yourself perfectly. But you see, the problem with technology is also that the governments, they're coming together much easier now too. And I'm afraid of the moment when there will be no place to go to, any place on the planet. After the governments, they will come together.
Which is why we're here, and which is why we are doing what we are doing right now. So hopefully are going to change the way things go at the moment. I mean,
yeah. Once again, I'll always come back to the having faith in the decentralized nature of the human spirit. You know, who are you going to beat? Who's going to win with the decentralized army, which is everywhere all at once, or the centralized power? There's an ebb and a flow, and it's a game as well. Jurisdictions, offering incentives for you to come to them. I mean, we see it now with states and governments offering incentives to attract people, and it's always the ones that need to attract people that turn to the incentives.
Pardon me, you see, the problem with the statesmen is they're not that sometimes interested in the prosperity of their communities and something like that. They're above national interest or something like that. They don't have this spirit. They don't have a flag. They're gray on the political spectrum. They're just not interested in at all at anything besides of money. They can do harmful things just in order to if they have this community of the governments somewhere, thanks to the technology, or they will create one day. They can do harmful stuff. They can ignore the incentives for the communities and something like that. They can get countries poorer, but they don't care because they will become richer and more powerful, so they can ignore the interests of the people.
Yeah, I agree, but I still think that incentivizes the decentralized army. Right. It's individuals versus the state. Individuals make individual decisions, and we're all doing it every second of the day, 7 days a week, and it's unstoppable. And in a way, the glue that sort of that sticks these decentralized networks together are ideas and things like what we're discussing now. And maybe 5 people will hear this conversation and change their mind on something. That's another 5 people on the decentralized team.
Sorry to butt in, but paradoxically, this is actually one problem that we are experiencing, I think, because these people who are already used to thinking in this way are very hard to join forces, right? It's very difficult for them to actually, collaborate and do something together, right? So what we have here is a small victory, or maybe a major victory, depending on how you look at it, right? Because we have done something that is still in theory, like it's still one of the projects that I've seen on your map, right? Some countries have these, but like nothing has been implemented so far, and people have been, planning for years. And our this realization stage, we came to it fairly quickly, I would say. So this also gives me hope that, yes, we need to fight back. We need to sort of stand our ground.
I hope for the best too, but I'm just trying to be this lawyer of the devil here, just putting some cold shower here. Just
there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the answer to that devil's advocate question is always, I think, the difference between centralized and decentralized. The power of individuals spread out across the world or across a nation is palpable, and I believe that it's the best way to go about things. It produces the best technology, the best ideas, the best everything, because it's the voluntary interaction between individuals rather than a small group of people sitting in an office or a building deciding what happens to thousands of people. It's why we love the free market.
Exactly.
Yeah, the signals from the free market are the right signals to be looking at to see what's going on and what you should do and what you should pursue.
Right. Thank you. It's just that we will need to sort of round things up as much as I'm enjoying this conversation, but maybe we can go back to one last question about Montelibero. What do you think of what you've seen? Because you've been here for it's your 3rd day technically, but like you've been here like for maybe 2 days, 3 days.
I've been really encouraged by what I've seen so far.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the community that you've got here. The fact that there are lots of people that have got different stories that have chosen to move to a country that is a little outside of their comfort zone, but you're making it work. You're developing your own clubhouse and community. You've got your own internal mechanism for trading with each other, which everyone seems very hyped about and to be using very frequently. So it's also just in terms of a place to live as a country, it's a beautiful place. Like the weather's great. It's not the most developed of countries, I think, but it's, you know, a good place for starting from scratch and building your own community.
Exactly.
So,
it works to our advantage, if anything.
Yeah, everyone has made a great impression on me. Everyone's been super helpful, and this is something I think is common to libertarian people. Like they're often very focused on helping other people, and there's a great sense of community, which is the opposite of what a lot of people claim about libertarians. They claim, wrongly, I would say, that they're individualistic people because they believe in individual rights. But actually, paradoxically, individualism in terms of rights often leads to people saying, hey, like the only way we're going to thrive is if we voluntarily cooperate, because no state is going to be here to help me. No state is going to provide resources for me or whatever. I think that leads to a more pro-social mindset, and I've definitely felt that since I've been here.
Thank you. What about you, Tim?
Yeah, so I have fully immersed myself here, and here are my takeaways. The community is excellent. It's palpable. You can feel it. You can feel the people here working towards something. I love this clubhouse. I love what's going on here. I love the fact children are running around. I love the fact that the adults are all helping. I love the fact you're cooking together. And when I sort of like imagine the next stages of MTL City, I'm feeling the same vibe, and I'm assuming that the same thing's going to happen. And there are buildings there now. There are 3 buildings being built. There's people clearing land. There's stuff happening. So it's really happening, and that's super exciting, like super inspiring. My only reservation with this, and we've spoken about this already, is the fact that you're using
the Stellar platform,
Stellar blockchain. Yeah.
Right.
However, I'm not convinced that blockchains are useful other than money, you see. And we've spoken in depth about this, but what I've discovered and what I've realized is that you have chosen to do that for a very good reason, and that you are aware of the trade-offs. You're aware of the trust layer that is there between the real life assets that you have and the blockchain, and I'm comfortable with that now. When I first came in and I saw, you know, tokens and tokenomics and all that stuff doesn't excite me at all. But I appreciate now that you're using it as a tool to get your ends. And I fully hope that in the next 5 years, the Bitcoin blockchain will offer you the option to be exclusively on that, because it's the only decentralized one. You know, you may run into problems in the future where Stellar is an attack vector for you, and I wouldn't want that to happen. I would want you to succeed. So other than that, yeah, love it. I love what's going on here, and I'm excited to see so many tech savvy people sort of innovating. Yeah, obviously I wish you all the best. Can't wait to come back and see how it's progressing. Also, you know, if you want to create a kind of anarchic system like this, you're doing it the right way. You're actually doing it. You know, regardless of whether or not you think this system's going to work, you are actually doing it, and you're doing it in a decentralized way. You know, Peter's talking about the free private cities model. You know, yeah, I can understand why that's a good model, having someone in charge, sort of, you know, a private corporation or a private company, you know, dealing with those things. You're not doing it that way, and all power to you. Let's see how it turns out, because it's a work in progress. And the more living examples we have of all these different governance models, the more people are likely to do their own version of it. So good luck to you all.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the thing we usually discuss with our guests from abroad, that we are trying to be this beacon in the dark. Because maybe we won't succeed. Maybe we will make some mistakes, some grievous one. But we're seeing it ourselves that example we give, it actually inspires so many people from all over the world. And we just, one of the best things at least we achieved, and we are going to push for that to be the example, to be this beacon of light in the dark, something like that.
Yeah. But thank you, Tim, for drawing our attention to these problems that we are already anticipating, like in the long-term perspective, and we might run into them later, but we are already factoring in all these risks. We're trying to annihilate,
attack surfaces.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. No,
yes.
I agree. You've convinced me that of the merit of it.
Right.
But I do see it as a stepping stone, in all honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of the milestones, I would say, along the way. And yeah, we don't know where it will lead us, but that's the beauty of it.
It's the chaotic system,
exactly.
Man. The best idea wins, basically.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thank you for your kind words. This was really nice of you to actually say such things about the community. We're really grateful for you to come over, and we appreciate your attention to details, because like it actually, you want to learn more about the community. You talk with people all the time. I can see that, and I can see how interested you are, and how like you open your eyes, and like you're very inquisitive, as you said at the very beginning, and that's exactly what we need, because no website can probably reflect that. Right? And hopefully with your podcast and this little podcast that we have here, we're going to attract more people. If you're hearing this and you're wondering if it's actually a good thing to come over here and just, check us out, feel free to do so. You're more than welcome to join us, join the Montelibero movement, and maybe we'll be working together to build a better future for all of us, right? Thank you. Thank you to our guests from the Free Cities Foundation. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Peter. It was really nice to have you here. And I've been accompanied by Michael Querens, of course. My name is Birkin, as usual. Now we have cameras installed and everything, so you'll be able to see most of our faces in the video. So thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.